My name is Elaine Harper, and I've spent almost 60 years on this ranch. Harper Creek isn't just land to me, it's where my father taught me to ride, where my husband Tom built the porch with his own hands, and where my son Jason took his first steps on the dusty red earth. That's why, even now, I can't tell you the exact moment my boy started seeing this place as an investment instead of a home. I just know the night it finally broke me. I was holding a warm peach pie when it happened. I'd baked it that afternoon, the way Jason always liked, thick crust, extra cinnamon. I walked out toward the field, thinking I would simply hand it to him, wish him a happy birthday, and slip away before the noise got too loud. But the little birthday dinner he'd told me about had somehow turned into a full-blown event. There were valet boys running up and down my gravel drive, and a tent so bright it made my ranch look like someone else's wedding venue. A security guard stepped in front of me before I even reached the edge of the lights. He held up a hand like I was a stranger trespassing on my own soil. I opened my mouth to explain, but Maddie appeared behind him, her dress shimmering under the fairy lights she'd had strung up earlier that day. "It's fine," she told him. "Just walk her back to the house. We don't need interruptions." Interruptions. That was the word she used for me. And Jason. He stood a few steps behind her, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes fixed on the ground like a child caught doing something he didn't know how to defend. He didn't say, "Mom, come in." He didn't say anything at all. I walked back to my kitchen, set the untouched pie on the counter, and sat there listening to the music thump against the windows like it was trying to shove its way inside. Something in me hardened. Maybe it had been waiting years for that moment. So I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and walked out to the generator shed. People tend to forget who really owns a place until the lights go out. And if you think cutting the power to 100 guests was too much, you need to hear what led to that moment. Because that night wasn't me losing control. It was me finally taking it back. Harper Creek Ranch has a way of breathing with you on quiet mornings, when the sun slowly pushes itself over the horizon and the air is still cool enough to taste like metal and dew. You can hear the land wake up, hoofbeats in the distance, the murmur of the creek, the wind dragging its fingers across the grass. Those sounds raised me as much as my parents did, and I grew up believing they would always anchor me, no matter what storms life brought. When I think back to my childhood, I can still see my father standing on the far ridge, leaning against the fence he built with his own hands. He'd lift his hat at me whenever I ran to him, a simple gesture that said, "You're mine, and you belong to this place." My mother used to hang quilts over the porch rail to dry, and their colors, sun-faded reds, blues, and yellows, would ripple in the wind like flags staking our claim to this patch of Texas. Everything about my life was tied to the land, the seasons, the chores, the celebrations, even our griefs. We didn't run from hardship, we just worked through it, one day at a time. When I married Tom, he fit into this world the way water finds its place in a stream. He wasn't loud or flashy. He spoke softly, but worked hard, and he loved this ranch almost as much as he loved me. Together. We rebuilt the barn after a storm, planted pecan trees behind the house, and fixed up the old porch where we'd drink coffee before dawn. I used to joke that the ranch was our first child because we tended to it before anything else. But then Jason came along, and everything shifted. Jason was born in the middle of a dry summer. The trees were brittle, the grass pale, but the day he arrived felt like rain after a drought. Tom held him before I did, his rough hands trembling against the tiny blanket. We raised Jason on the rhythms of ranch life, bottle-feeding calves, fixing fences, helping with hay. He grew up chasing grasshoppers and climbing the old pecan tree, hollering my name across the creek when he wanted me to watch him jump from the big rock into the shallow water. He was a joyful boy, bright-eyed and full of curiosity, and for years, he would announce to anyone who would listen, "Someday I'll run this ranch with Mom." I believed him. Maybe that was my mistake. Things changed when he left for college in Dallas. I remember standing in his empty room, staring at the posters still taped to the wall and the boots he forgot to take, feeling like I'd been emptied out along with the space. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. Kids leave. But what I didn't expect was how quickly the city would pull him away, piece by piece. Tom passed during Jason's sophomore year, and I swear the ranch itself felt that loss. The wind seemed quieter, the nights darker. Jason came home for the funeral, hugged me so tightly I thought he might break, and promised he would come back more often. But life in the city moves fast, and grief moves slow. He returned to his classes, his internship, his new friends. Each time he visited after that, he stayed a little shorter, left a little sooner, talked a little less about home and a little more about opportunities. I never blamed him for wanting more than what we had here. Harper Creek is beautiful, but it's not glamorous. It's not the kind of place that gets attention unless someone turns it into something it was never meant to be. Still, every now and then, when Jason talked about his life, corporate jobs, promotions, apartments with skyline views, I felt like he was drifting farther than just the miles between Dallas and Willow Ford. One Sunday afternoon, years before any real trouble began, Jason and I sat on the porch sharing sweet tea. He watched the field for a long time, his brows drawn the way they get when something's weighing on him. Finally, he asked, "Mom, have you ever thought about selling a little bit of the land? Not all of it, just enough to make things easier for you." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even a suggestion delivered with certainty. It was soft, almost tender, as if he genuinely believed he was helping me imagine a different life. But the question hit me in a place I didn't know was vulnerable. Selling land wasn't like selling furniture or livestock. It meant carving away a piece of our history, handing it to someone who would never know its story. I told him gently that the ranch was fine as it was, and he nodded, though I saw something flicker in his expression, a mix of frustration and resignation. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. It felt like the first ripple in still water, a sign of something shifting beneath the surface. I told myself I was overthinking it, that all young people wonder about easier paths. But years later, standing in the dark kitchen with a peach pie cooling beside me and a party raging outside, I realized that question had been a warning I didn't recognize. Because the boy who once said he wanted to run the ranch with me had grown into a man who saw it as leverage, and the land that raised us both was about to become the battleground where everything we stood for would be tested. And that was before Maddie ever entered the picture. Jason didn't waste any time introducing Maddie. The moment he called to tell me about her, I could tell something was off. His voice wasn't the same. There was a kind of hesitation in it that I wasn't used to. "Mom, she's great. She's really into design and stuff," he said, almost like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I didn't quite know what design and stuff meant, but I didn't press him for details. Instead, I just listened to the tone of his voice, something that had always been sure and confident before. But now, it felt different. The first time she came to visit, Maddie arrived wearing white sandals that had already gathered dust by the time she stepped out of the truck. She immediately started taking photos of the front gate, like we were part of a photo shoot for a magazine. Jason stood beside her, beaming with pride, his smile almost too wide, like he was showing off a trophy I hadn't been introduced to yet. I didn't say anything at first. I kept my thoughts to myself, the way I always did. But I couldn't help but notice how out of place Maddie seemed. She wasn't interested in the barn, or the horses, or the creek that ran through the back of the property. Instead, she was fascinated by the house. She asked me how long the walls had been painted that color, if I'd ever thought about upgrading the kitchen. All of her questions were about making everything look better, more polished, more like the homes in the magazines she clearly read. The day after she arrived, Maddie and I were walking around the property when she casually mentioned, "You know, this place could make a really great wedding venue. I've been to places just like this in the city. Imagine, 200 guests, a beautiful band, catering. This place could be amazing." I didn't say anything at first. I thought maybe she was joking, but when she said it again, I realized she wasn't. She was serious. It wasn't just a wedding. It was an idea to turn Harper Creek Ranch into something else entirely. For the next few weeks, Maddie and Jason started talking more about turning the ranch into a business. They wanted to host events, turn the barn into a reception hall, add cabins for guests, and charge people to stay the weekend. I tried to push it all aside, thinking maybe it was just an idea they'd drop. But Maddie didn't stop. She talked about it more, and the plans kept growing. It wasn't long before the conversation shifted. Jason started talking about selling part of the land to fund these new ideas. He said things like, "Mom, you've been here your whole life, but the land isn't making us any money anymore. This place could work for us if we gave it a chance." At first, I thought it was just a passing comment, but every time Maddie would bring it up, Jason seemed to agree a little more. And when he talked about the ranch, he didn't talk about it like it was a family home. He talked about it like it was a property, something to be used, not cherished. It wasn't just the plans for the ranch that bothered me. It was the way Jason started looking at it, like it was a burden he didn't want to carry anymore. I had raised him to love this place, to see the value in its history, its roots. But somewhere along the way, he'd started seeing it as just another asset, something to be upgraded, polished, and eventually sold if it didn't bring in enough money. One day, I overheard Maddie talking to Jason while I was out in the garden. I didn't mean to listen, but I couldn't help myself. She was on the phone, and I could hear her voice, sharp and clear. "Elaine doesn't get it," she was saying. "This place could be worth so much more. We could make it into something real, a high-end wedding venue. People would pay to get married here. Jason, imagine it. We could turn the barn into an event space, and with the cabins, we'd have a whole retreat." I felt my heart sink. She wasn't just trying to improve the ranch. She was trying to transform it into something that wasn't us. Maddie was already planning for a future where Harper Creek wasn't a family home. It was a business. It was no longer about family. It was about profit. The next morning, Jason and I sat on the porch, sipping our coffee in silence. The weight of what had happened the day before was still heavy in the air. Finally, I spoke. "Jason, what's going on? Why are we talking about selling part of the ranch? This land has been in our family for generations. I thought you'd want to keep it that way." Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He looked at the ground, then up at me. "Mom, it's not like that. It's just, the world's changing. We can't hold on to this place forever. We need to make something out of it. We can't just keep it the way it is." The words hit me harder than I expected. My son, the boy I had raised to respect this land, to carry on our family's legacy, was now talking about changing it, selling pieces of it off like it was just another property to turn a profit. I felt a rush of confusion, hurt, and disappointment. "Is this really what you want, Jason?" I asked quietly. "To turn this ranch into something else? Into a business?" Jason didn't say anything. He just looked at me, the weight of his words hanging in the air between us. I wasn't sure how to respond, or if I even had the words left to express what I was feeling. And that's when I realized Maddie wasn't the only one changing things. Jason was too. The wedding was the turning point. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I agreed to let Jason and Maddie host their big day at Harper Creek. At first, it seemed harmless enough. After all, it was my son's wedding. How could I say no? Jason had promised it would be a simple celebration, just a few close friends and family, and the ranch would be the perfect backdrop for it. But when Maddie got involved, everything began to change. She wasn't satisfied with the ranch as it was. "It's beautiful, but we could do so much more with it," she'd say, as though she were an interior designer giving a home makeover. Slowly, little by little, she started making requests: new furniture for the living room, a grand chandelier for the dining hall, white curtains in the windows. I didn't mind at first. I thought she was just excited about the wedding, about making things special. But before long, her requests became demands. The walls needed to be painted, the floors replaced, the kitchen completely remodeled. "The photos will look so much better with a modern kitchen," she'd say, as if it was a small thing, just a little touch-up to make everything look pretty for the big day. Jason would agree with her, always nodding, always promising to help. It became clear, though, that this wasn't about a wedding. It was about turning the ranch into something it wasn't, something I didn't recognize. One afternoon, while I was out in the garden, I heard Maddie on the phone with someone. She was speaking low, as if trying to keep her words secret from me. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I heard my name, I froze. Elaine is sweet, but she just doesn't get it. This place is sitting on a gold mine. We could turn it into a full-scale wedding venue. Think about it, Jason. People will pay top dollar to get married here. We could turn the barn into a reception hall, build a few cabins for guests, and charge people to stay the weekend. My heart sank. She was already planning to change everything, my home, my history, my family's legacy, into something to profit from. My father's land, my mother's kitchen, the barn where Jason and I had spent countless hours fixing fences and caring for cattle. To Maddie, it wasn't a place of memories. It was an investment opportunity. That night, Jason and I were sitting on the porch, as we often did in the evenings when it was too hot to do anything else. I tried to keep my tone even, but there was a tightness in my chest that I couldn't shake. "Jason, I don't understand. Why are we talking about selling the land? Why are you letting her turn it into something it's not?" Jason's face tightened, but he didn't look me in the eye. He took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts, and then he said the words that made everything feel like it was slipping through my fingers. "Mom, you don't understand. Maddie and I, we've been talking about it. It's not just about the wedding. It's about making this place work for us. We can't keep doing everything the old way. We need money. Mom, we need to get ahead. This ranch, this land, everything here, it's just sitting here, not doing anything for us." His words cut me deeper than I expected. I had spent my whole life protecting this place, raising Jason to love it, to care for it. And now it felt like he was ready to sell it all for something newer, something flashier. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak calmly. "You really want to do this, don't you? You want to turn everything we've built into a business?" Jason's eyes flickered, and for a moment, I saw something that wasn't just about money. It was a kind of helplessness, a fear of failure, as if he truly believed there was no other way. He didn't have the words to explain it, but I could feel the weight of it in his shoulders. We can't just keep holding on to things because they're ours. Mom, we have to move forward. You taught me that, remember? But it wasn't about moving forward. Not really. It was about losing what we had, losing the ranch, losing our roots, all in the name of progress. The next day, things got worse. When I returned to the house after a long morning of feeding the cattle, I walked into a room that was unrecognizable. The door to my bedroom was closed, but the smell of fresh paint wafted through the cracks. I opened the door to find my entire room rearranged. The old furniture was gone, replaced by sleek, modern pieces that didn't belong here. My photos of Tom and Jason, the quilts my mother had made, were gone. Maddie had turned my room into a bridal suite, complete with white linens, fancy pillows, and a bouquet of flowers on the dresser. It wasn't a place to rest. It wasn't even my space anymore. I stood in the doorway, not sure whether to laugh or cry. My whole life was disappearing right in front of me, and I didn't know how to stop it. Jason appeared behind me, his face flushed. "It's just for the wedding weekend. Mom, don't make a big deal out of it." But it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about everything that came after it. It was about the land, the house, and me, all of it being changed, piece by piece, into something I couldn't even recognize. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I never thought you'd do this, Jason. I thought we'd always be able to keep something of the past, something real." But as I looked at him, standing there like a stranger in my own home, I realized the truth. Jason wasn't the boy I raised anymore, and Maddie wasn't just a daughter-in-law. She was a force, one that had already started pushing me aside. Maddie and Jason's dream of turning Harper Creek Ranch into a profitable business crumbled faster than I had ever imagined. Their plan to turn the ranch into a wedding venue, full of charm and potential, failed to attract enough clients. The money they poured into it, money they didn't have, began slipping through their fingers. Maddie, ever the opportunist, tried to find new investors, but nothing stuck. Jason lost his job in the latest round of layoffs, and the financial strain became too much. With mounting debt and no plan, Maddie walked out on him. She found another man with more to offer, but even that relationship ended, as she was left with nothing but a pile of broken dreams and empty promises. When Jason returned to Harper Creek, he was not the same. The confident, ambitious man who had once spoken about using the ranch to build a legacy was gone. The man who stood before me now was weary, his clothes worn, his eyes tired and filled with regret. Gone was the vision of a prosperous future, replaced with the reality of failure. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't meet my eyes, but I could feel the weight of his apology. I didn't immediately forgive him. The hurt, the betrayal, and the deep disappointment I felt from watching my son turn his back on everything we had built, on everything we believed in, was still fresh. Trust wasn't something I could just give back in an instant. It would take time, if it ever came back at all. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, the quiet of Harper Creek, the land that had always been so familiar and comforting, now seemed to mirror the emptiness I felt inside. Jason had left, chasing a dream that wasn't ours, and now he was back, defeated. But despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to turn him away. "I don't know where we go from here," I said quietly, my voice heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. "But I'm not giving up on the ranch. This is my legacy, and I'm not letting go of it. Maybe one day we would find a way to rebuild both the ranch and our relationship. Maybe we could find a way forward, together. But for now, I knew that Harper Creek was still mine, and that was all that mattered."